The goals were to appreciate the issues around the condition of utilities and how they directly impact community sustainability, and for elected officials to realize we are stewards of critical resources and have a responsibility to maintain the systems and the funding so the infrastructure is in better shape physically and fiscally in the future. The objectives, as we go along here, number one is gain an understanding that pipes, pumps, and valves have a certain life cycle and proactively plan for ongoing repair and replacement, and that is critical. The part that is specific to Shelton is that much of our infrastructure in our city is 60 to over 100 years old. The average design life is 50 to 80 years, so we've outlived a lot of our usefulness. It is underground, it's not very glamorous, and as long as it works, we don't want to spend money on it. We have to appreciate the sacrifices of the generations who came before us and provided us with utilities that have enabled us to go on for so many years with reliable services and low rates. Also, something that is relevant and trending throughout the nation is that many of the municipal employees have worked for cities for 40 years or more and are retiring with the institutional knowledge of the systems captured in their brains and not necessarily transferred to paper. We have to make it a priority to capture that knowledge. And we are seeing that happen with the recent retirements of a couple of our long-term employees. We have to appreciate the impact of delayed and deferred maintenance as it dramatically increases future costs, including municipal liability, emergency repair costs, loss of citizen support and confidence, as well as the ever-increasing material and project costs. Publicly owned utilities are provided by and belong to the citizens. Too often there is a lack of understanding that diligent maintenance and expansion adds value to the citizen investment and to the community as a whole. We have to consider the affordability of utility rates, and we have to consider tools to help manage rate increases. The City of Shelton offers 17% reduced rates to those who qualify for low-income, disabled, and low-income elderly ratepayers. We could potentially expand on that program, but the cost for running our utilities would have to be made up by the rest of the ratepayers who are currently also struggling to pay these bills. Some jurisdictions in Washington raise the rates for out-of-city limits customers, charging people in the urban growth areas more to help offset the fees of city residents. However, it's very cumbersome and it's not very effective. We need to develop a capital improvement plan and commit to funding that plan. Part of that is it is very important to identify and inventory components of our system and rate conditions in planning improvements and on ongoing maintenance. It's not glamorous or fun, but will prevent large-scale emergency capital replacements. If done correctly, much of the future funding can be raised in existing rate structure. As debt is paid, the rates build a reserve fund to be used for future projects. This is considered a conservative method of building a savings plan, lessening the need for borrowing money to fulfill needed repairs and expansion. Reserves can also be used to help fund capital improvements as one-time dollars. Borrowing is also a good choice for capital improvement projects. I was surprised to learn this because typically the low interest loans have little impact on rates and allow projects to be completed at today's costs. We need to understand the pitfalls of using utility reserves to fund general operations. Sometimes this is used to enable lower rates. It is not sustainable. You may have have lesser rates for a while, but it can be disastrous in an emergency situation. An example of this is the city of Tenino has a newer treatment plant, I believe it's 5 years old, but has not raised rates to cover costs due to political pressure. They are facing an immediate $45 increase in sewer rates because they are floundering. We need to understand the impact that poor systems, failed or at capacity, have on community growth and viability. High-quality infrastructure is smart stewardship of public funds and investments. Defunded or neglected infrastructure investment reads as a sign the community doesn't have the will or confidence to invest in its future. It doesn't portray success or desire to move forward and projects apathy rather than energy. So that was the teaching part. And at the end of the teaching part, I had an opportunity to ask a number of questions of the experts there. Is there a way to reduce current rates? Debt service and operation costs must be paid. We can look at deductions for classifications of customers, but those would have to be subsidized by other ratepayers. To reduce rates for some would increase rates for others. That's the typo, it's rats. Oh well. Are there any funds for rate reduction across the board, such as grants? No. When and if funds become available for infrastructure improvements, they will be directed to emergency projects. There is no foreseen funding for public works until at least 3 bienniums have passed. All the monies have been diverted to fund education, and the day after I attended this class is when it was announced that the state was being fined $100,000 per day for not funding education. So it was timely. Can we reduce rates as the debt service is paid off and we get more customers? Not responsibly. As debt is reduced, we build savings to fund future projects. A pay-as-you-go account that will mean we won't have to borrow as much and will enable us to avoid extreme rate increases. A large city, and forgive me, I can't remember which one, recently reduced rates because they didn't have any upcoming projects and the rates were going along great and people wanted to pay less. And the city had a major catastrophe and had depleted their reserves, meaning a huge loan and higher rates than before. Can we depend on grants for our funding needs? Grants are getting more competitive, more matching funds are required. Conservative funding is identifying how to pay for improvements without grants and considering grants a bonus. So I was fairly discouraged at the end of this and had hoped to get some creative ways that we could reduce our rates, that we could maybe give our citizens some bright hope to look at. So at the end, as I was voicing that it was kind of discouraging, the people who were teaching the class pointed out to me that they are actually using Shelton as an example of a community doing things right. We are moving ahead responsibly in a very difficult economic season, but will be far ahead of the many communities who are facing even larger costs with fewer opportunities for grants and low-interest loans. There's no question at all, no question, everyone agrees that our rates are too high for the income level of our citizens, estimated to be about $50 too high for the average income. But there is not a viable alternative at this time. Many communities will be faced with an even larger affordability gap as they are forced to fund their failing systems with whatever methods are available. This crisis is expected within the next 10 to 20 years. So by that time, we should be pretty well along, and our rates will probably be very comparable, if not lower, than these other cities that will be in this extreme situation. So that was my report. It was a very good class. I'm really happy that I went. I got some information on potential funding avenues, but you know, it's going to be a challenge.